Yo, what's good everyone, Xilonen is finally here, aka the new CEO of GEO, aka DJ BJ, aka the rollerblading MC with thighs by the plenty. In my opinion, the best support we've had since Farina, definitely the most versatile. Let's get straight into 15 teams for it, but a quick disclaimer first, 11 of these 15 teams have Farina. Because I know not all of you have Farina, I'll be dropping a video today with 10 Xilonen teams without Farina, so subscribe if you want to see that one. Even still, I assure you there is an alternative to Farina in each team, so if you let me know in the comments which team you like, I'll give you alternatives for her. Let's start with Nouvellette, a character that did not need a buff whatsoever. Child's still out there stranded in the Primordial Sea looking for some buffs of his own while Skirk's throwing him around like a dog toy. A lot of people use this same team with Zhongli instead of Xilonen, but where Zhongli shreds Hydro resistance by 20%, Xilonen shreds it by 36% and gives everyone a 40% Hydro damage buff. We do lose Zhongli's interruption to resistance though, which can sometimes be an issue for Nouvellette, but if you find you don't need it, Xilonen is a damage upgrade. I also like the healing to counter Farina's bleed. You could always go for comfort and swap out Kazuha instead of Zhongli, which gives you the Geo resonance too. Nouvellette appreciates water, Farina appreciates cake, Xilonen appreciates music, Zhongli appreciates wine, Kazuha appreciates leaves? It's a team that appreciates life. Talking of life, we have this Navia team with her truly moving on from Malus and Silver and finding some more people to lean on. I've seen different variations of his team using Chiori and Kachina, which I'm a fan of. It's worth taking note of the fact that Navia's skill damage increases when you're producing more crystallized shards. While a burst applies enough Geo to take the skill to level 3 a few times, producing extra crystallized shards is going to help her take it higher. Xilonen's Geo application is one of the downsides, so she won't create as many shards, but she will shred Geo and Pyro resistance, as well as buffing Geo and Pyro damage. Even if Navia's skill deals less damage from there being less crystallized shards, it won't be by too much because of the buffs. And the upside is a normal's burst and Xiangling's burst will deal more damage. Overall, Xilonen is an improvement to this Navia team. Swapping out Pyro for Hydro, we have this team using Farina and Yelan. You do lose Bennett's attack, but you gain buffs from Farina's fanfare and Yelan's passive. If you don't have Farina, you can use Xingqiu instead, and his C2 will shred the opponent's resistance to Hydro by another 15%. I actually prefer this team to the last in single target. All this damage is going to leave enemies dead in the streets of Fontaine. You know who else is dead in the streets of Fontaine? That's right, Claire V. Nice one, Harlequino. She's another character that benefits from Xilonen. We know her vape teams are strong, her overloaded teams are nice too. Xilonen gives her mono pyro teams a buff, so if you want to swap out Zhongli or Xiangling for more personal damage on Harlequino, this would be the way to do it. There's a lot of debate over who's the better unit between Kazuha and Xilonen, but I consider them to be two cheeks of the same ass. You'll find the two pair together well in a lot of hypercarry teams. If you did want to swap out Kazuha though, you could use someone like Yelan or Fischl instead for either a vape or overloaded team. Arlecchino can't receive healing from teammates either, so if you wanted to skip Xilonen's burst, instead just saving it for times when the rest of the team is low on HP, you could shorten your rotations by just using a skill instead. I saw a lot of people struggling with building teams for Mualani last patch too. Xilonen opens up more options for Mualani, with you maybe opting for Mualani, Xiangling, Nahida and Xilonen. For those that like Farina and Mualani together, you could drop Nahida. If you don't like running your Xiangling on a million energy recharge, you could drop her for Kazuha. The Hydro Resonance gives Mualani and Farina some extra HP, and the Kazuha Xilonen pair gives them buffs and shreds out the arse. I know Mualani prefers vape teams, but Mono Hydro would be an option if you just wanted ease of use. That way you're not relying on elemental application like you do in the vape teams. For a more normal Mono Hydro team, we have Yelan, Farina, Xingqiu and Xilonen. The team has a lot of energy with either of Yelan, Xingqiu or Xilonen holding Favonia's weapons well. Xilonen replaces Kazuha's shred as well as his elemental damage buff while providing healing. Because we no longer needed Kokomi's healing, we put Xingqiu in there for extra damage, resistance to interruption, and resistance shred from his C2. This team might be my favourite of the bunch. I didn't think Mono Hydro could get any better, but I'm glad to be wrong. Side note, if you go for Xilonen's weapon and get Chiori's weapon along the way, don't panic cause Chiori's weapon is going to be broken on Farina. With this team having enough energy, she doesn't need the energy recharge on her usual weapons, but with this weapon instead gains 88 crit damage and 48% skill damage. Is genuinely a crazy weapon to lose the 50-50 to and underrated by a lot of people. Okay, so you're pulling on the 5.0 banner to build up some pity because you don't like the look of the 4 stars on Xilonen's banner. Figured you'd pull a Chevreuse. The gold star flashes. Raiden, with no Chevreuse. I know how you feel, but you'll be glad to hear Xilonen can function in the same role as Chevreuse as a buffer in overloaded teams. Chevreuse performs slightly better in this role. It is a niche after all. But Xilonen isn't far off and is a lot comfier. If you have a signature weapon, she feels just as strong as Chevreuse in overloaded teams, to be honest. If you want to, you have the option to play Kujo Sara instead of Fischl too. I'm hoping Mavuika will work as a Xiangling replacement in this team, and maybe an Electro Natlan unit in the flex slot. Another of my favourite Xilonen teams is this one with Noelle as the on-field driver. I like Noelle as a driver in mono-hydro teams, but swapping Xingqiu out for Xilonen makes it even more fun to me. We have one less damage dealer this way, but with the shreds and the buffs, it makes everyone else deal more damage. Noelle's place in the team feels more justified this way, with her dealing some genuinely strong damage. And Xilonen gives us the Geo Resonance too, which is good for the team. To anyone with a C6 Noelle sitting on their bench collecting dust, this is your wake-up call to build her. She'll benefit your account for Imaginarium Theatre too, with you probably not having too many Geo characters built. Noelle's biggest downside in my opinion is that she's energy hungry. You can swap in and out of her without losing the Geo infusion though, so it's nice to have characters like Yolan or Xilonen holding Favonia's weapons to funnel particles back into her. Yoimiya's another character people have on their bench collecting dust, myself included. I won't lie, I simply prefer Arlecchino. I enjoyed this team though, and playing Yoimiya in a double Geo team gives us another way to build teams for her. For enemies that move around a lot or deal big damage in melee situations, it's nice to have the option to let Yoimiya stretch her legs. Xilonen's gonna make those fireworks pop so loud, even Yoimiya's dad will hear them. If you don't like the idea of having 2 sustain units, you could swap Zhongli out for Xingqiu. It won't be as comfy, but with a couple crystallized shards and Xingqiu's resistance to interruption, I think this will raise the ceiling for Yoimiya, at least against enemies that don't attack as much. We're all getting a free copy of Candice in 5.1 and she's even on Xilonen's banner. With her being my favourite design in the game, I like to play her as much as possible and have found a plunge team to be the best way to use her on field. I usually have Yolan in the flex slot, but you don't get the full benefit of her in plunge teams with you not using as many normal attacks. Xilonen's an upgrade here, shredding hydro resistance and increasing hydro damage to make both Candice and Farina pop off. Candice has the eyes, Farina has the pies, Xianyun has the skies, and Xilonen has the thighs. This team was meant to be. We've got more teams to look at, but just to let you know, I dropped an up-to-date Candice guide last week which looks at all the best teams up to 5.1, so if you're interested you could check that out after. Now for my favourite part of the video. We've looked at some of Xilonen's most meta uses, let's look at some of the more experimental teams because this is where I feel she gets fun. Firstly, let's stick with the plunge team and use Xilonen as the on-field DPS. Swapping out Candice for Goro gives Xilonen some geo damage and defense. If you didn't already know, this is what her damage scales off. She won't be able to heal with a burst, but it will deal extra instances of damage. I don't feel it's worth building energy recharge to get it back quicker, so you can focus more on damage orientated stats. With Goro holding Favonia's Warbow and switching straight into Xilonen, this'll give us some particles anyway. I imagine you're wondering if DPS Xilonen is any good and if it's worth pulling her to make her one. Honestly, I don't like her much as a DPS. I prefer Navia in the plunge role and prefer Navia, Ito and Noelle in melee roles. You can use her as a DPS for the memes and the overworld, but don't expect much in endgame modes. Okay, we're cooking with this one. Nilou is a bloom support, but she has a mechanic in her kit that can convert her normals to hydro, so she can work as a non-field driver or DPS. Prior to Xilonen's release, it was Copium. You'd have Farina for HP from Hydro Resonance, as well as a fanfare buff and an extra source of damage. Kazuha with his buffs, as well as his grouping, which shouldn't be overlooked, because it does help Nilou in this role with her infused normals having a small AoE. For the sustain role, Zhongli was the best choice, but not because he has synergy here. He was here purely for his 20% shred. Xilonen brings 36% shred, 40% hydro damage for the team, and even heals to counter Farina's bleed. If you can get a weapon, she gives even more hydro damage to the team. If you get Chiori's weapon on the banner, that's going to be Nilou's best in slot here. And you're going to be dealing genuinely strong damage with Nilou. She finally has a use for a DPS stance and it only took 2 years. It is fitting though, she's a dancer and Xilonen's a DJ. Farina can cater the party while Kazuha throws leaves everywhere? For his next team, I was wondering if Xilonen could make Kachina a viable DPS, because I like that jumping drill thing she does. I'll be honest, while the damage is decent and Xilonen herself has nice uptime, there's a lot of downtime with the rest of the team. Mona's Omen only lasts 5 seconds, and even with all the constellations, Kachina can only do the jump attack 8 times. His skill has a 20-second cooldown though, and a burst has an 18-second cooldown. If we can get a support in Mona's place who can give us more Night Soul points, this team might actually work. I don't see it happening though, because it would have to be balanced around the kits of all Natlan characters. I guess we'll find out come the end of Natlan, but I look forward to seeing if we can get someone to fill that slot, maybe even a quick swap sub DPS. Child didn't like that joke I made about the Primordial Sea earlier, so he's back to prove to us he's not completely tied to Xiangling. It might be a little awkward to play this team given the long cooldown on his skill, but if you keep an eye on it, you'll be able to make it work. As a C1 Child haver, his C1 reduces his skill cooldown. I'm actually having a lot of fun with this team. I'm looking forward to seeing people who have his C6 play around with it too. Oh, what was that old school Genshin whale called? Tony Toes? Where did he go? I'll check his channel out at some point to see if he's playing around with his team. And for the last team, we've got to show our girl Aloy some love, right? Probably the worst collaboration you'll ever see in your life. How'd you fumble a deal with one of the biggest companies in the world by not giving her constellations or a story quest? Don't worry guys, I'm definitely not speaking emotionally because I'm a fan of Horizon Zero Dawn or anything. It's not like she's my only triple crown unit and I pulled a 5-star weapon especially for her because her signature's shit and was hoping maybe one day she might have enough meta teammates to bring her up to the level of a C0 4-star. Well, today is that day with the release of Xilonen. It was all worth it. I'm usually a bit stingy with my scores, but today, I'm giving Xilonen a 9 out of 10. She's an upgrade in some already strong teams, a side grade in a lot of others, and only a very slight downgrade in comparison to specialist units and niche roles like Chevreuse in Overloaded. Easy to build with trash artifacts, give a Favonius sword and you're good to go. If you do go for a weapon, she's got a universal 25% elemental damage buff, so it doesn't even matter which stats your teammates scale off. Just her personal damage and geo applications underwhelming, but that's fine. She can't have everything. Don't forget to subscribe for the video showing 10 Xilonen teams without Farina. Check out my Candice guide I dropped last week if you want to know how to get the most out of yours. And take it easy.